I'm Roniel.
I'm DaRon. I understand it's someone doing it just for other people's edification, but very clearly when I look at a lot of the software, like the damn vulnerable bank application, I see that it becomes very obvious the individual doesn't know how to properly program. They aren't they don't have a strong development background. And I say this because, number one, the code itself is poorly structured, poorly organized, and poorly written. Number two, there's no consistency in the style. The style is all over the place. And I suspect at least a part of that is because it's copy and paste and things of that nature rather than the one individual's own code. But it very quickly starts to agitate me simply because I'm going, if we're going to write software to help developers and help security professionals, can we at least please demonstrate that we know how to write good software? Good doesn't necessarily mean secure. I mean, obviously, if it's intended to be insecure, then I would assume that it is going to have insecurities. But it should still demonstrate good, clean, general programming guidelines. And in general, at least some consistency where I can say one or two people wrote this, or I can at least differentiate between who all wrote it. I mean, and that's one of the big things a lot of people don't understand, but with coding standards and coding guidelines, you still have the art. You still have how Roniel likes to program versus how DaRon likes to program. And when you look at the code, you can tell Roniel wrote this, DaRon wrote this, so and so wrote this.
Oh, you can tell that I wrote it. It's so sloppy. No, I mean, but I guess to that point, it still depends though, because see, when I look at your code, you can tell that you had development experience, and then it also depending on the development, like where you came from,
Right.
like because I've seen a lot of development shops where it does not look like yours, and we're talking about people who's supposed to be senior levels and up, and it still looks sloppy, still doesn't look secure, and as you know, we know that there's a problem out there. But I think a lot of it has from that mentality, and then for the security community, they don't know how to code anyway,
Right.
so they copy and paste different things, like and just throw it in there. Like with mine, when I was doing that super node vulnerable node thing, it was like node already sucks, and there's not a lot of good standard there. So it's kind of like, to me, it looks sloppy. But a lot of the time, it's like they're just trying to get something going and get something out. But I do believe that at some point, even if you did that, you should go back and try to structure it, make it more secure, which is what I would do anyway, and make it more functional, but also make it where it goes together seamlessly.
Right.
Which is what I see when I look at your code. It's like, especially with Java, but it's also how Java is, how it looks. Like some code, it's just, it looks like shit. Like doing VB.net,
Yes.
no matter how you try to make that look, it still looks like shit.
Pearl is one that people is laugh and joke about because it's easy to write, but it's not easy to write so that people can read it well, if that makes sense. So we have easy to write, period, easy to write so that people can't understand what in the world is going on, and very difficult to write so that people can actually read it. That's at least the claim. I've never had a problem reading Pearl, but a lot of, to exactly what you're talking about, a lot of people complain and say, oh, well, it's hard to make Pearl look good and be clear and be easy to follow.
It is. But I can follow Perl. It's not that hard to follow it. I just never was a fan of Perl, but I think that certain languages you can follow,
Right.
like with C, i- if you do it, it can be ugly if they don't do it right. But if you follow a certain standard, it's you can understand. But with
Yes.
Java, it's like it comes that way. That
Yes.
was the beauty to me about Java, is that it looks well put together,
Yeah.
but it's still to me all over the place. I still feel like when you think about Java, you think about a person's head exploding with so much stuff. You know what I'm saying? And other than that, but it's still beautiful to see. And like I said, it was easy for me to go and look at the super vulnerable Java application and read the code and know what was going on than to have to scope around. Like I told you, when I was a developer, I'm going through all of this code and I'm like, I don't know what the fuck was going on. And it was in JavaScript.
Yeah.
So you know it was horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, you could see different styles, different things. It looked like people just slap shit in there. And I'm like, trying to trace that, cross-reference all of those together, it was a headache.
Yes. Yes. I think a large part of that is with JavaScript. First and foremost, a lot of the people writing it aren't classically trained and educated computer scientists. So they don't know how to really well develop their code and lay it out and all of this other stuff. And instead, they are largely, to your point, they're throwing things in that they pull off the internet and kind of trying to make it work. And that's what you see when you hear people say, oh, well, just go to Stack Overflow. That is not, I've never heard that from a computer scientist. I really haven't. Because we're trained to, okay, let me break this up, let me do this. The only time you're going to go to Stack Overflow isn't if you're looking for code, it's if you're asking a question about something really esoteric or some kind of strange bug or what you think is a bug behavior, something of that nature. And this isn't saying computer scientists are great, but a proper computer scientist anyway should be able to and should rely on the language documentation and then use that when they're writing their code. And just, I'm all over the C# API. I'm all over the Java API. I'm all over the C and C++ standards. That's where I sit there. Okay, well, I want to do, I don't know, read a file. I want to read a file. Well, which library do I call for that? I already know which library to call for that. But if I didn't, I would quickly look it up in the API. I would look for something that's tied to that, and then I'd look for the appropriate methods. And
So the way, and it just goes back to the training type, because you had just recently, and I don't know why I wasn't thinking about that. The documentation. A lot of this is online, but see, they taught us in school using reference books, and so I would have a bunch of books that I would go to reference, which is just so old because she's got all of this online. But also, I'm just being truly honest, I wasn't a Stack Overflow guy. I would always, when I would ask a question to Google, would send me that Stack Overflow, but I didn't trust the code there. None of the code ever worked.
right.
And the first time to me, when it didn't work, I stopped because I had to do a lot of work to just get it to work.
Yeah.
So it just made more sense to go find it in a book, figure out what I wanted to do, and then go do that. And that was kind of my thing. Like, I didn't really think about it in that way, or it was kind of like trial and error, looking like, trying to figure these things out and then going from there. But I never really asked questions on Stack Overflow, and I never really took most of the code. There's been time when I was beginning trying to take code, but it never worked. So my thing was either looking at the book or going and asking the teacher, like, where was my problems at?
Yeah.
That way I could learn how to figure that out. Other than that, now I might go straight to the documentation, the API that you said, and I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that, and not going to my book. You know how long flipping through the book trying to find one thing.
Right.
So,
right. And you're exactly right. I do own C#7, a book on C#7 and 6 and 5 and 4 and different versions of different languages. I don't use those except when I have to cite something. See, so if I'm sitting there going, okay, well, I don't know, let's say, for example, we're writing for DISA or writing for NIST or whomever, I actually pull the books and use them to cite. I do point to the API as well, but those books are usually, the ones I get are the official print. And that
Mhm.
then means that anyone can look at that version and they'll see it and it hasn't been modified. That's the only reason why I have the books. I like them for that purpose, but I don't use them for anything else because, like you said, even if it's an electronic version, I still have to go through and do a search. It's not as handy as proper Java doc. The C Sharp API, Microsoft's API is horrible, absolutely horrible. I usually wind up just going to the ECMA instead, goes straight to the actual standards. I don't I don't understand why Microsoft, when they made C Sharp, didn't they stole the Java doc through, what do they call it, XML doc or something like
Yep,
that.
yep,
Uh,
yep, yep.
They stole that, but the output is nowhere near as useful. Absolutely, positively nowhere near as useful. It is a pain to hunt down and find a lot of stuff in there.
So that's why I say Java is more uniform and it's all together. A lot of the other language are just they're not. And like I said, I don't try to claim like this is some good thing. I just know that I worked a lot with JavaScript. So, JavaScript is not that uniform either, in my opinion. And it's just all over the place.
Yeah.
Especially with all of the languages and frameworks that keep coming out with JavaScript. It's like, can we just keep one and
Yeah.
just use that? We don't need that many. Like, how many frameworks does Java have? Like, how many different Java frameworks or different fucking things you're gonna use for Java? Like, come on, man. Like, we don't need that. I mean, it has different things it allows you to use, like the applets and servlets and stuff like that. But JavaScript just all these different JavaScript languages, frameworks. I mean, so what's the point? But
That
no,
need to hide it. That's what it is. They need to hide the
they're hiding
language.
how bad it is.
That's actually what they're doing. That layer of
Yeah.
abstraction.
Mm-hmm. It's a bad language, but I just used to thought it was beautiful because of the things you could do from a web development standpoint, if you want to call it that. But that's why I say I extensively use it because that's all we use.
I
It's HTML and JavaScript.
Okay, so I think another issue I have with JavaScript in particular, and this is actually everything that's client side, is while they do have standards, none of the clients adhere to it. There's no point in saying, I learned JavaScript. First of all, to your point, JavaScript is utterly massive. Other than learning the general construct, it's not like you're memorizing all of the different frameworks, which are nothing more than abstractions. And if you're using jQuery, which is pretty dated at this point, at least
Oh
I
yeah.
feel, uh, other than making Ajax calls and doing the whole dollar parentheses and whatever the element is, that's all you need to know and remember of jQuery, because going back to what we were saying before, they actually have a well done API where it's very easy, not as easy as JavaDoc, but still relatively easy to find the method I want, the class I want.
Mhm.
So I don't need to memorize anything other than language constructs. But
Yep.
the lack of uniform interpretation and understanding across the browsers and across all clients. So we've talked a little bit about this before, but your PDF reader and how
Yeah.
they interpret it versus your web view, which has zero JavaScript engine in most cases. And then someone will make a custom JavaScript engine in order to execute JavaScript. And what standard do they follow? Well, they claim they follow ES5, but do they really? No.
No, they don't follow shit. And I mean, you got to think about it. People are being lazy as well, which is why it doesn't make sense to make your own thing if you're not going to sit down and go through the steps to make sure that this thing is secure.
Right.
And the reason that I know, and but it's been out for a while. But like I said, just coming from somebody who was a web developer, and I've done it for different shops, even as an intern, having the opportunity to make my own, well, or at least be a part of making my own PDF engine, that is nothing new. And being a developer, I know that we didn't put any thought of any security, none of that. And that was the reason why I told you, majority of the time, I was siloed out because
Right.
I was like, well, there's no security here. I could do such and such and such and such. And they were like, well, maybe you should go to security because you don't seem like you want to do development. I love development. I love writing code on my standard, my
Right.
time. But I also know that security is my first thing in mind. Like, we're not doing this right. I can just go through and hack. And then when you show them that, they're just like, well, how do you do that? But you shouldn't be doing that. So that's why I didn't last too long in most development shops because or software shops was because I would call out to the fact that we are doing this wrong.
I back in I think the first time I had to deal with a PDF engine like that was 2009, but it could have been as early as 2007. It didn't matter because back even before that you were doing exports, file exports, and it's the same exact thing with a file export. We talked actually about it with the whole, okay, well, you have to take into account what the client is and how the client operates and all of this good stuff when we talked about some of the CSV injection things. But the when I had some government systems that wanted to export to PDF, the first thing you do is you sit down, and this is for any requirement, and you do a risk assessment, which of course includes threat modeling. And so we were looking at it saying, okay, well, what can be done? And the most obvious part of that is we don't want someone to be able to execute arbitrary code on it, client side or otherwise. We don't want them to be able to PDF arbitrary files, and we don't want them to be able to PDF arbitrary URLs.
Yep.
So then you start, or I should say URIs if I want to be really inclusive. So you then start describing and creating a system that locks all of that down. And it's not a hard thing to do. And it wasn't back then. So I guess I'm at a little loss because it wasn't a hard thing to do. It wasn't a hard thing to think about, and it wasn't a hard thing to protect. But it was also something that we demonstrated. Okay, uh, because we had to test that their mechanisms worked, and it was demonstrate this is why you shouldn't do this behavior. I mean, point being, this has been getting done for well over a decade, and that's just with PDFs, and even longer before that. And I'm sure you remember how many attacks that were there way back when against Adobe.
There was lots of attacks. Silverlight, Adobe,
Mm-hmm.
Flash, all of
Oh
those
yeah,
things. I mean, there
Flash.
was just so many different freaking attack vectors that it was ridiculous. So that's what I'm saying. Like, just because it's you see something, you think, oh man, I haven't seen anybody else do it here or recently, doesn't make it new.
Right.
And like I said, I knew, as you knew, that this was a thing because every time I see a PDF reader, that was what I was trying to do.
Yes. Yes, you're trying to PDF other websites. So way back when this was acceptable, what we would do is we would PDF like playboy.com.
Yeah.
Right? Now the home page didn't have anything on it. I want to be very clear. There was nothing. I mean, they were well known for their articles. Jokes
I
aside, they were.
I remember that phase. I used to do that too. So
Yeah, and it's not like there wasn't adult content, but it let the client know there could have been. Or we could have gone to anything, because if you can PDF playboy.com, then you can PDF whatever, which means now I can point this thing and use it as a web proxy of sorts. I can use it to go out and hit malicious websites. And so now your PDF engine goes there, and what do? My website attacks your PDF engine, and all it's trying to do is drop malware on it. And this is something that we have been doing forever. I saw the Russians doing that back in 2006. They'd be going after PDF engines and using those things to drop malware and then just ransomware the hell out of servers. Now, they were doing that in the former Soviet bloc, and they'd only started to get ransomware here in the United States at the time. But yeah, this is old hat. This is anytime I see a file export of any kind, I try, can I do arbitrary code? And that's on the engine, but that's also on the client that reads this thing. And it's, can I point this to something arbitrary? Are you taking in a URL? Okay, well, if you're taking in a URL, can I point it to someone else? Can I
And
point it
that's
to your internal stuff?
what makes, like I said, people don't like people in that's not from this generation don't know that, so they think that what they see, oh, this is new. I just remember things. This is coming from somebody who knows that area, the malware stuff. Like, that's nothing new, and it's nothing nobody's been doing. Which is why when people say, "Oh, I can't believe this is still around," well, you didn't think it was going to still be around. You didn't think that some people are just too lazy to update things, or they're still using out of date shit. That's why a lot of these places are still getting hacked, because they're still using out of date shit.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people are trying to reinvent the wheel. And instead of using what's already out and then adding your protections on to that, they're trying to reinvent and then say, don't really know what's going on or what it takes to secure that thing. So, and then, like you said, like we talked about before, they don't put security first.
Right.
It's not the first thing in the life cycle.
Right.
It's the last thing in the life cycle.
Right.
And by the time they know they got compromised, it's too late. So you can assume that most people were probably already compromised before they even know. So
That's true. They have, every now and then you'll see people do a study. I think it's a little generous to call it a study, but something of that nature, where they throw a Windows 9X online without a firewall or anything, or they'll do like Windows XP and see how long it takes to get compromised. And it's usually minutes. The truth is, you see the same thing with all of this kind of stuff. And I think that's one of the travesties, is when I get kickback as a penetration tester for something that is very obvious and critical. I'm always left going, I guarantee I wasn't the first one to find this. Other people have found this. You probably have a problem.
it reminds me of the thing you had found, and so much kickback on it. I'm like, they probably don't even know that they had been compromised already. Because if you found it, and it's probably been out here for a while, somebody has found it. Somebody has found it. It's just this. They have had this in their system for a long time before you came along.
Yep.
Somebody has done something, and they don't probably know that they were compromised.
Yes. Yes. And with things like the PDF engines, etc., there is rarely any kind of a trail. And even if there is a trail, those systems tend to get used so heavily, the export functionality so heavily, that trail is long gone by the time you even start to think you've been compromised. You'll have no clue what in the world happened.
What they were trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
That's right.
that's the crazy thing, and I don't know, man. I think people are just delusional today on what's going on, and again, the chase for fame.
Yeah.
Is that I want to be the guy to say I did this. You haven't though.
Yeah.
You just utilize somebody else's stuff, which goes back to the development and copy and pasting.
Right.
In our industry, there's so much copy and paste people that there's no originality there. There's no creativity. It's not, and I'm gonna say this: there's nothing wrong with getting a structure or some type of context, and being able to say, okay, well, this is how I would do this. I've seen somebody else do this, so maybe I can go ahead and formulate it that way. That gave me a start, but it's not taking it, adding in, hey, I'm going to take out that they reached out to this thing and put in burp collaborator,
Right.
and then say, hey, I wrote this.
Right.
This was mine. And then you kind of get called out when we know you didn't write it because you don't even understand what it's doing.
Right. Right. Yes. And that's why you can't adjust it in any reasonable way, shape, or form and get it to do exactly what it is you want.
And then if you're going to take somebody's code, then you need to be able to read it and know what's going on, which is why we go back to you. I guarantee 100% of people don't even know that. They're probably not reading whatever you put in your reports to know that things are not as what they seem.
That's that's true. Well, and a large part of that is, as you know, because I've sat there and you've seen it. I always write my own stuff. My exploits are mine. My shells are mine. All of it is mine. Number one, I've been doing this for a long time, so a very, very large library, but more importantly, that's just how I operate. That's how I grew up. As you know, that's the time you and I grew up in. This
Yep.
stuff wasn't all online, and heaven help you if you used someone else's stuff, because you were compromised if you did.
Oh man, listen, I remember my first time, trying to get into the. I told you how I got into it, and I'm just like, my first time I got compromised, and I'm just like, what did I do? I'm trying to read this. I wasn't really understanding, and I was just like, fuck it, just throw it in there and do whatever. And literally, reverse shell guy dropped a fork bomb on my machine and slowed it down, and then they back then they were playing around with just crashing your machine and just wiped everything.
Right.
And
Yes.
every time I would go back on there, it was it was there. So it would, no matter if I reinstalled, it would just go back and crash it again. So it was just like, what the fuck did I do? And that's when I told you, like, you know, I had to keep calling my cousin, and I had to figure out how, because I wanted to figure this out, and I started figuring out how to find them, fix them, then also build them. But it was just like, what did I do wrong? And then it was funny when I went to a chat, there was like, they did the same thing to me again.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one guy was just like, you just keep, you don't know how to recode, and you just keep downloading other people's shit. So it's easy for somebody to do. And I said, go back and read. And I'm like, there it goes. So that's the thing for me. It's like, if you're going to take somebody else's stuff,
Right.
know what it's doing, know where it's doing it at. And it's easy a lot of times, especially with the times today, like they're not writing stuff in like C or anything else.
Right.
They're doing it in Python. So it's easy to see what's going on. But back then, if you were looking at stuff like Perl or maybe C, and you didn't understand all the things that are going on, you probably miss it. But even then, it's easy to get. But I like to read. I like to see what's going on, see what tricks or things you're doing, and then you get to a point and you're looking at it and you're like, this is not it. This is not gonna work at all. Most people don't understand, and that's probably why you get the secretive shit,
Yeah.
But it back then it was, you don't share your code.
Right.
You don't share anything because a lot of hackers were competitive. Like they didn't want their stuff to get out, and what they were doing, it doesn't matter if it was just a piece of malware. You don't want anybody to get it.
Yes.
Because then the next person, script kiddie or whatever, going to take that, utilize it, try to put something together, and then rebrand it.
Yep. Yes, that's true. That's true. Or the other alternative is they start claiming they're the ones who did whatever this thing that you did was, and now you have to somehow prove that you did this thing and it wasn't them. If I compromised this system, well, how do I prove it was me? You wouldn't just necessarily drop a whole bunch of stuff from that system because it's rude, but you might provide how you did it. Well, the problem is if Johnny come lately over there has just ripped off your code, he published it all over the place. He's claiming he did it. It was a mess back then. It's still a mess today, and I don't think the trust is warranted any more today than it was back then for code you found online, and that's as a developer or as a security professional. It really isn't.
It's not. I don't trust anything I get. I always break it down, tear it apart. Even exploits that are supposed to be ran, I kind of just break them down. Shit, hell, even applications, like there are applications that are supposed to be run. I know you can't go through the full everything, but I'll break it down in IDA Pro and start mapping things out and seeing what's going on and trying to see how it reacts. And I even use an API monitor sometimes to see what API just calling on my sandbox machine. So I kind of go through a thorough process to see what it's doing and see where it's calling out to see whether it's, vulnerable.
Yeah.
But just coming from somebody who knows it very well and yourself, like, but back then I don't think, and that's what I would try to explain to a lot of people in this generation or even beyond or before. Like, that's the way you think. Just asking, hey, can you share your code? Can you share this? No, because if I share something with you, you'll take credit for it, or you will do something and then damage somebody else's stuff and then blame it on me.
Right. When it goes swimmingly, it's all on you. When it goes
Mm-hmm.
horribly, DaRon gave me this code. DaRon
Mm-hmm.
told me to do this thing. I had no role to play in this.
Yeah, and that's why I don't believe in doing so. And if somebody did give you code, it was to play a joke on you
Yes.
or to compromise you. So
Yes.
that's from the experience from our generation.
It is. And I want to take another very important, I guess, component of this, and that is lately you'll hear people say, oh, we have to give this to the development team or the QA team so that they can reproduce the same exact thing. And I'm like, I do not want to teach them how to do this, first and foremost. Secondly, I mean, you've seen some of the payloads. A lot
Hmm.
of the stuff I'm doing will not leave your system pretty. And if I give it to you and you fuck up your account, you fuck up the box, now you're coming after me saying, oh, well, that's not on me. You didn't know what you were running.
They didn't know what they were writing, what they were looking at. Like I said, a lot of the people, this whole concept or idea is that everybody needs to be able to know how to do it, and no, they don't. We are professionals for a reason.
Right.
I don't come to a doctor and say, hey, I need to know how you did this.
Yes. Teach me how you do heart surgery.
Yeah. This guy has been doing this for years and years and years in order to be good at this. And I'm going to just come out and say, hey, teach me how you do that in one day or a week. It's not happening.
Yeah.
And, that's what I don't think they understand that concept. So they this idea of, hey, everybody should be able to do. No, they shouldn't, because people don't know what they're doing. They're not going to read the code. They're not going to understand what's going on. They're just going to run it and hope that it does magically what it's supposed to do. And then something gets fucked up and then they're like, well, screw you. It was you that did it, because guess what? IT or their boss is going to be like, what the hell did you do? And then, well, I ran it from this person and this. Well, we're going to go and attack them. But you asked us
Right.
and told us that you wanted people to be, everybody from C levels on down, to be able to do that.
Right. And on top of this, as I know you know, and anyone who's listening to this knows, because we have all been there, we've all done it, and we've all seen it. What is the first thing that happens when you teach someone a fancy new trick and they haven't been in the profession a long time, so they don't, it's not that they don't understand the ethics, it's more that they're driven by that hunger to see it for real? What if I were to teach you how to do this horrible thing and give you these exploits? What is, as a young person, as a developer who doesn't, like I said, have instilled in them that more, I'm going to call it morality or the ethics, the ethos of our profession, what do you think they're going to do?
The same thing they would do when you're young, your hormones start kicking off. Want to see what that means? You're going to try it. You're going to go crazy and stuff like that, and you're going to just let it rip.
Yep.
And with no thoughts, no thinking, you're just going to do it. And then next thing you know, you took down a whole entire system. And I know how that feels. Like I said, I was guilty of that. I get something, when I was younger, and I'm just so excited to see this and see what happens, not knowing what's going to go down. And guess what? Fuck up a whole goddamn system. And,
Yes.
you know, and that goes back to the script kiddie mentality, which is why they would call people script kiddies,
Mm-hmm.
is because one, you're new, you don't have the experience. Everything that's shiny it's just the most interesting thing in the world. Everything is shiny to you. Everything is just brighten up, and you don't really understand anything. So you're just like, hey, let me try this, let me do this, let me do this, and let me do that, without actually thinking about the consequences, thinking about the things that go into it, and gaining the knowledge, understanding. So, that's the same thing you see in the consulting industry, where people coming in, even the seniors, principals on down, it doesn't make a difference. They all do the same shit, where They're not really understanding what's going on. They see a shiny new tool, they see a shiny new exploit, and they just kind of want to run it. They don't really understand it, and they don't know what it goes into running or doing or developing this thing, which leads them to not understanding how it works and also fucking up stuff.
Right.
So that's a big problem in our industry as well. That has not changed from the underground to now to the professional realm, whatever, non-professional. It has not changed. It's the same thing. And because majority of the people in the industry, we're maybe what, I don't know, maybe 80, maybe 99% don't know how to code. And they tell you this in the beginning. Oh, you don't need to know how to code. You know how many comments you don't need to know how to code. I just run this tool and it does it. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And that's what I thought was funny. That's why I knew when I went to these conferences back then, when they were just starting all of these things again, I was just like, you're telling me I can get into this and not write a lick of code, not understand it, and I could just hack all the things? Oh, that's a gameplay. That's a playbook for disaster.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I do blame Retina for at least a large portion of that.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah. Like they made it very easy. And I remember first using that tool and I was like, oh, this is easy to fucking hack the network, but I still didn't understand
Right.
what I was doing.
Right. Yes, that's exactly right. And so then we evolved from Retina, we got what is it? Metasploit. And then from Metasploit we got Core Impact. And it has just moved on to the complete autopone baloney on the networking side. And I think at least a portion of that is permeating the mentality of folks on the application security side, which makes no sense because we have to understand what's going on. We have to. We don't have the luxury of, oh, you'll just go into your Juniper router or your Cisco router or your firewall and you set this setting to this. No, 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 no. It doesn't work that way. Ours is much more complicated. So
Yeah, it's not easy. You can't run it. You think, oh, most people think, oh, run burp suite. It does not work that way. And especially if it's a desktop or a different type of application, you're not going to be able to run a burp suite and say, hey, give me all the findings. You got to manually review the code. You have to understand what you're reviewing and then kind of line that up and cross-reference that to how the application works in order to be able to exploit that.
Right.
And even remediating is not the same as you would do with networking, which is why when network pen testers come into the application realm, they don't understand what's going on. And I've known network pen testers who can't act like they can't hack their way out of a cardboard box.
Right.
You know, you give them an application, tell them go ahead and do. They don't know what the hell they're doing. And that's why we say the reverse. You can't. An application security professional can be a network pen tester or anything else, but a network pen tester can't be an application security professional. It doesn't work that way.
Everything is an application. Everything runs on software. I'm sorry. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
That's why I was always saying I knew a network guy isn't a pen tester. He was just a really brilliant network guy, and he's still brilliant to this day. But he could never hack networks at all. And I say, well, that's because you don't understand software. What do you mean? What do you mean, Roniel? I was like, well, the protocols, what? Software. Everything that you're trying to hack into is an application.
Right.
So when you're doing buffer overflows, heap overflows, stack overflows, still applications. How do you understand how to do that if you don't understand how to hack application or how they're written? So they teach you a formulaic thing and how to do step by step by step, but you don't really understand how it works and why you're able to do so. So that's why I was like, because I understand applications, I can hack that. And I don't have to be the most sophisticated network guy to understand how to hack their stuff.
Right.
So that's the crazy thing about it. I mean, people just need to get with that. Like everything runs on with software, even hardware. So that's why application security professionals can touch everything.
That's right. That's right. I think long gone are the days where your hardware uses little next to no software. For the vast majority of it, it's operating electronically and not mechanically, and that is where software comes in.
Hmm. So that's the thing. That's why for people to say application security is a secondary thought, you have lost your goddamn mind.
Yeah.
Because application security is the primary thing right now. The number one. It's not offensive security. It's not the physical security and all of this. It is application security. Because
Physical
everything has
security.
an application.
Physical
Go ahead.
security has always been. It has never been viewed very kindly, not by our industry, because it's non-technical. It's completely non-technical. Every bit of it. The and most people, when they talk physical security, they're not even talking about the hardcore stuff where you're saying, okay, well, how does your barbed wire face? What kind of wire are you using? Razor wire are you using? What kind of wire are you facing? How deep does that pole go in? How deep does that fence go? How many layers you no, they're usually talking, oh well, I picked a lock. Well, that's great. I think I told you, my daughter, when she was 13, without ever having done it before, without ever having seen it before, picked with a thumbtack, one thumbtack, an extraordinarily fancy lock. And it didn't take her long at all. She, just goes in there. She and my wife had been, we did janitorial for a number of years at a daycare. And they accidentally locked themselves out. My wife's purse and all this other stuff were in there. And, it's one of those fancy locks with the sidebar and all that good stuff. And my daughter took out a thumbtack and a thumbtack and popped it open. My point being, as someone who's done it with really, really expensive locks and safes, it's not hard. It's actually more your ability to not be heavy-handed that matters the most. I mean, you can be heavy-handed all you want with like a master lock, a cheaper lock. But with the more expensive ones, you just have to not be heavy-handed and just that's it.
Yeah. It takes nothing to it. And hell, a lot of times you don't even need to pick the lock.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like there's other ways around. If somebody wants to get in, they're going to get in.
100%.
So,
Yeah, you have windows, you can cut through walls, you can take a card and slide it through, and you can take anything and just jam it in real quickly with a lot of locks and pull it out. I mean, that's what bump keys do anyway. I mean, there's so many. The whole thing's. I don't get it. And it gets even worse when you talk about like handicap doors, the handicap accessible doors, because literally you just slide something under the door and have it come up and grab the latch. Uh, anyway, yeah.
It makes no sense.
Yes.
Like I don't need to be in your facility to get into your facility.
Right. Yes. Especially these days.
Yeah. And that's why I said, like, for people to think that application security is a secondary thing, you lost your mind. That is where that's where the money is coming in at. That's the reason why, like I said, I was just so lucky to be pushed into that field early, because I thought that the networking thing was the thing because that's what everybody was doing. But then I started to notice that application security was a thing. Like, they were taking it more seriously. So, it's like they still want to make networking the hot topic, but I'm sorry, it's just an old girlfriend.
Yeah.
It's an old girlfriend to something more hotter.
I'm telling your girlfriend.
Well, tell her. That has nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with me. But get over yourself. Like people, get over yourself. If you're still thinking that your networking things or whatever you're doing in application security secondary, you lost your mind. If you think that PDF engines are new to being exploited the way they are, they've always been that way, you've lost your mind.
Yeah.
All right. And if you were taking code off of Stack Overflow and other applications without reading them and understanding and being able to formulate your own thing, you really lost your mind. And you should be stripped of whatever you are, because you're going to wind up eventually compromising somebody else's system to somebody else.
Yep. That's true.
So, write your own stuff. It's okay to get some ideas and some context and understanding, but write your own stuff. Yep. It'll make you a better consultant, a better professional, whatever you want to say. So, and get you to that higher level, which is another thing I don't understand how some people were. Oh, that's just still kind of, it's just a little bit. How are you there? And you can't code? You can't even read code? That's your job.
Yeah, application security, but you can't read code. I could maybe understand not being able to write, because reading and writing are actually two separate skills, and they were historically taught as two separate skills. Contrary to popular belief, peasants could read. Serfs could read. It was the writing where they were a little sketchy. But
and even then, if you can read it, that's better than not. Even if you can't write it, it's better to be able to read it and know where the things are aligned. But my thing is, if you need it to exploit something,
right,
and you can't write your own stuff, you won't be able to bypass or get past things, or you won't be able to find ways to inject things. Like, you just won't be able to find ways to exploit it. You'll be stuck at only reading and knowing there's a vulnerability there, but you can't bypass the issues.
Right.
But you can't write your own stuff. You'll be stuck with using Metasploit.
Right.
Which, as we know, gets caught all the time.
Right. Yes. You're right. If anyone has anti-malware on their system, it's going to get flagged.
Yeah, I mean, hey, people don't believe in those things.
Yeah.
And it's retarded. But I always, as I say, it's a layer of protection. It's not going to protect you 100%.
Right.
Nothing will, but it's just having those layers.
Yep.
That will slow the attacker down, so you can see what's going on to kick them out or boot them out or do whatever you're gonna do. It's having that protection.
Yes.
That layer.
Yeah, you do. And what people don't realize is that in every compromise I have ever seen, there were always multiple failures. You wouldn't look at it and say, oh man, this is the thing that, no, it was, okay, this failed, this failed, this failed, this failed, and that all came together, and that's how you got compromised. That's it.
And they didn't have any alerts or anything set up to do that. And that's something that people need to get used to when we talk about defensive, is being able to, that was like my first thing, is being able to be notified at the right times, the time that things are happening, and knowing what to look for.
Yeah.
And I was good at knowing what I wanted to look for that people wasn't even thinking about. So anytime something happened, I was alerted right away.
Yeah.
And other people were alerted that there's something going on here. So, that's what I look at when we look at the layer of protection of things, is having that layer of protection for when things happen. You can see it, you can, hear it, know that it's something's going on, and handle it right away.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Anyway, I'm Roniel.
I'm DaRon.
And if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more topics like this one. Until the next time.
Have fun.